from the Majapahit Empire to a surfer's village. Tugu Hotels take you on a journey through years of Indonesian history. It is a living museum where every detail was carefully collected with the pride by the Anhar family. What makes this place so unique? And what is the story behind it? Let's find it today. Could you please tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and what are you doing?
Okay, so I'm fully Indonesian. I was born and raised in a small town called Malang in East Java. Not many people internationally know a lot about Malang, but it's a super charming town full of history because it used to be the center of all the kingdoms in like many centuries ago. So a lot of temples, a lot of plantations. So yeah, I lived there for 17 years. Then I moved to first Denver. Actually, first I moved to Switzerland to learn French, very unsuccessfully. But then I sort of ran away to Paris because I thought I should learn French in Paris, you know, where the French is really spoken, not with the Swiss accent. So I had such a great time. I lived there for 3 months. Then I went to Denver, and I was planning to finish my studies in the University of Denver because it had a really good hospitality major. But a year after, my parents found out that I was, you know, playing too much. Even that my grades were great, but when they call at 3 in the morning, I was never there. So I went back to Switzerland, and then I had to do like some serious schooling for 4 years at the École Hotelier in Lausanne. Then my first job was in New York. I was working for HVS. I was a hospitality consultant, appraiser, doing feasibilities all over the US. So I really found out about the US, I think, more than any Americans, because I went to appraise things from, you know, the fancy ones like St. Regis and Four Seasons and the Caribbeans and this and that. But also like the Motel 6, the Super 8s, you know, by Highway I-495 exit ExxonMobil and so on and so forth. So yeah, I was sent to so many very interesting places, like dry counties, you know, the deep America.
Okay.
So yeah, it was really fun. But then I decided to come back to Bali because really I felt there was nothing as special in a way as well. Tugu, actually, our hotel, my father at that time had started only 2 hotels. But I think my experience in the US taught me a lot about standardizations and so on and so forth. But I was missing the sense of place and the depth of the culture that every hotel in the US started to feel the same. Especially we worked with this template, basically, that, you know, it was like interior, exterior corridor, you know, like every F&B venue looked the same, every facade looks the same. So my reports were becoming, very, everything the same. And I was missing that uniqueness and that exoticness of Asia. And I realized with our background, you know, there's so much untold stories about Tugu and about Indonesia. Well, actually, Tugu is just a channel for us to tell the history of Indonesia. So I wanted to come back at least for a couple of years. That was 2004. And 20 years after, I'm still here. I can't seem to leave this place.
What does Tugu mean?
So Tugu actually means monument in Bahasa Indonesia. The first Tugu hotel that my father created is at the Hotel Tugu Malang. It's in front of the main monument in the center of the old town. But it used to be called Tugu Park Hotel when we started. And then the first president came to stay, and then, you know, she was so mesmerized by how amazing our art collection and the stories that we try to tell via this art collection. And he said, you know, you guys are better than any of Indonesian museums. And so this is like a monument of culture, art, and history, you know, so you should just call yourself Tugu, because Tugu is the monument of art, culture, and history. So we changed from Tugu Park to Tugu. And since then, all our hotels are called the Tugu Hotels.
How does it all started? I mean, your father don't have a hotelier background, right?
Yeah.
I guess it's more come from the interest and passion.
Yeah, well, my father really has, I think, no interest in hotel operations. And it was, I think we kind of accidental hoteliers because he was a lawyer. Before he was a lawyer, he was a medical student.
Oh, wow.
And he was struggling to finance his studies. And so he worked part-time as a pharmaceutical company salesman. So he was sent to all these different places in Indonesia. And while he was going from one island to another, he realized all Indonesians were throwing away anything of heritage. Basically, all the old things were replaced by modern, functional, westernized items, whether it's things they love or just functional things. And that's when he started to fall in love with them. He started to collect them. I mean that's a long story, but his family himself, his great grandmother came from also a lot of collectors in a way. But when he was 20 something years old, he basically didn't really have that much. So he learned from making all the mistakes, and he really collects not for the value of the items, but more for the stories that it tell, right? And so his collection grew and grew and grew. Then he became a lawyer. His collection grew even bigger, and then my mother was going crazy. Basically, she loves antiques, but our house was looking like
Not that much.
a gigantic warehouse full of spider webs, and at one point, one of his clients gave him a piece of land because he won a case for him, and instead of giving him fee, he gave him this piece of land. And my mother's like, instead of just making warehouses, you should share these antiques with the rest of the world and tell the beauty of the Indonesian past, the ancient kingdoms and the immigrants. And that's how it started. He started the Tugu in Malang, and nobody abroad. And this, in 1990s, there was no Instagram, there was no social media. So Malang was nowhere in the tourism map for sure. And suddenly we were chosen as one of the 100 best hotels in the world. And, and it really put Malang in the map. And then I think because of that, we're like, this is our almost life mission. We should open the eyes of both international visitors and Indonesian younger generations of the beauty of our own culture, our own heritage, which is so little talk about. And I think because of our bitter history, a lot of Indonesians in 1970s, 80s just prefer to forget about the colonial times and so on and so forth. So, but history is what sets our identity, and I think it's super important, and it sets our country so different and unique than any other countries.
That's true. We cannot cancel this past experience, right?
Yeah.
It's been there, we can do nothing about it.
Exactly.
But the things, how we transform it in the future.
Yeah.
Hotel as experience.
Yeah.
I think hotel is not just a room, but more as experience, and you're providing this experience, which is, I feel, becoming a more luxury experience itself rather than standardized rooms and the same amenities in everywhere around the world. What is luxury for you?
I think the first thing you said, I really agree with about experiences. I think luxury, well, it's a combination of many things, but for sure one of them is unique, unforgettable experiences. And nowadays it's actually becoming more difficult to find this unforgettable, unique is the keyword, experience because of social media. How often do you find yourself going through Instagram and Pinterest and like, oh, that looks cute and that looks great, and then most people just started copying each other, and oh wow, it's trendy there, let's bring it here. You see it everywhere in Bali especially, this Mediterranean theme, and but usually what we see from being in Bali for 20 years. After a few years, then, you know, it's got left behind, and then we change again and we change again. And we need to be so careful about not losing our heritage, not losing our sense of identity throughout this process, right? Because suddenly you open your eyes one day and like, wait, this is not really Bali anymore.
Where am I?
Right? I understand that everything is about change, and I agree to it to some extent, but you know, the roots needs to be so strong that we don't get lost in that process.
Right. I think.
So speaking of luxury, right? So one is experience. Second, more and more for me, especially, it's about space, it's about nature, and it's about silence or quietness, you know. And especially here in Bali, you know, there's always sound of traffic and clubs, and you know, wherever you go, it's just it can get so overwhelming sometimes, you know, the sensorial influence. And I realized when the moment I move to like more remote places in Bali or to Lombok, where we have our Tugu in Lombok, and then that whole view opens up to this almost 360 degree of you know, beautiful ocean and forest. And I think growing sustainably is so important, that we don't lose this luxury of space, this luxury of silence and quiet, right? Because only then we can really like go internal, go into our minds, go into our hearts, go into our souls, instead of just reacting to just, you know, actions that was just put on your face and all your senses all the time. So yeah, I think that, and then the sense of place, of course, what, you know, I think I mentioned a little bit when I was in the US, I started to really miss, you know, what's like so exotic, what's so special, what's so unique about the place. And it made me realize how amazing Indonesia is, and how amazing Bali is, and how unique Tugu is, because inside it's not just through the antiques that tell the stories, but it's almost like it's indescribable air, you know, once you step inside Tugu, that you got transported into a journey through time, to the times of the ancient kingdoms and the times of the most romantic tales and stories of Indonesian history. And, you know, everybody should find their own USP, I guess, their own, you know, sense of place and their own uniqueness. But to remember to be really strong in communicating that, and to, you know, to make your guests feel that will produce luxury. Right. So yeah, I mean, still related to that, to having space, to the sense of place. I think it's so important. I think it's done in so many places in the world where you can only build a percentage of your land, right? Like if you buy 2 hectares, maybe you can build 500 meters. And I think we should really, you know, start being very conscious about this. And I encourage every, you know, hotelier, every developer here to understand that this is what people want. This is luxury. You know, luxury is to actually have that space instead of building every inch and every millimeters of your land into high-rise concrete buildings.
I think it's simple. If you want Mediterranean, you're going to the Mediterranean.
Yeah.
If you want high-rise building, you're going to Dubai.
Yes,
and
exactly.
if you want nature and space, you're going to Bali.
Yes.
And you're not mixing it all.
Exactly.
I think that's what is it for me. Talking about noise.
Yeah.
Atmosphere. Tugu Hotel in Changu was one of the first one.
Right.
Here and over the past couple of years, we see how the scene around you dramatically changed. How do your return customers respond to it, and how did your customer change over time?
Yeah, definitely changed a lot. So, I mean, like, to be honest, for sure, probably about in the beginning, I think the whole change started around 2015, around that time, where it suddenly like accelerated, right? Our real like returning customers before that, probably 75% did not return anymore. Like honestly,
wow. That's a lot.
they just say like, wow, what happened to Bali? Then there's this complete new market, right, in Changu. Younger, also families, expatriate families, especially during the COVID times. And they love this new Changu because of all the new things that happen here. And when you don't know what Changu was before, then the Changu now is great for so many people, right? The facilities that you get here, the amazing restaurants, the beautiful shops, how you have gyms, like the biggest concentration of gyms, and surfing right in front of our hotel. Everything is walking distance. So I think these new clients just like love Changu for what Changu is now. Having said that, in the beginning, we actually had this, we had so many feedbacks from people saying like, oh, maybe you should move your hotel, somewhere else, like, to like Karangasem or East Bali, or somewhere in Munduk or Tabanan or so on and so forth. But what we realize now is that we became so much more important right here in Changu, because all these people who never been to Changu or Bali 10, 20 years ago had no idea what Bali is really about, so when every day, every hour, when we see people walking into the Tugu in Changu, we see them, just struck and so shocked when they arrive in our lobby and look at this big Garuda and this
kingdom.
And they're like, what is this place? It's crazy. And then we see that how interested they are. They're like, well, tell us more about this, show us around. And they go and they take pictures in the Red Kangsi temple that we dismantled and rebuilt there from 1706. They walk around and in our spa, the offerings and the blessings that we serve to the Balinese gods before the treatments, and then how the therapist chanting mantra while doing the treatment, all of this makes them realize what Bali is all about, right? And so they don't have, how terrible the traffic is now in Bali. So it's so they were so thankful every day, even for people who don't stay inside the Tugu, when they try our spa, they have this very cultural dining experience here. They are just relating again to what I said before, the unique, unforgettable experience. For them, it's such a luxury to have this, right?
Yeah, it's not. It can be found just in a random place,
Yes.
Even though I was going around and read a little bit the history of this room, even though this table, right? I think itself is just a unique story behind that.
And you feel the energy, right? Because this table, this table is the place where the last negotiation happened between the Prince of Badung and the last leader of the Dutch East Indies, which then failed, of course, and led to the Puputan. Just imagine, it's not something that you can produce by making the same table, nowadays. It has so much history. That cabinet over there is where the Dutch Indian of Bali was writing to the Queen in the Netherlands, asking for her to stop the war. Because he was in love with the Balinese kingdoms. However, his boss in Jakarta, in Batavia, already organized a war, and the war finally happened. But there's just so much history in all this. So, people just love to hear the stories and find out about what Bali was.
Right. Even just thinking about it, I'm having a goosebumps.
Yeah, and then you can have dinners here, right? So you can have a completely Balinese cultural dinner here where it's served by 12 people and up to 24 people, even if you're just a couple, because this was a dinner that's inspired by the journey of the king of the Majapahit kingdom in the 14th century. So where he was conquering the different villages along the coast. And then, of course, he was greeted by dancers and the local cuisine there. So we really celebrate all this, and we want as many people to to find out and experience.
Preserving heritage and the Indonesian and Balinese culture is one of the main goals of your hotel, right?
Yeah.
How do you managing it to like bring this story alive? Especially like looks challenging for me is the very fast pacing world, you know, where we have a 3-second spin of attention and we need fast, and that's what we also recognize with like our guest, for example, that if before guest was coming and staying week or two and just exploring around and surfing and was having a very slow time, now we have a guest with the maximum stay of around 3 nights, who's just hopping around the island and just want to try everything in one day. But
That's
your
true.
story, what you're trying to say here, like to tell them it's not a fast story. How do you implementing it in your strategy?
Well, I think to start with, your product needs to be really strong, if we can call this a product, right? So this is, I think I mentioned a little bit before about having your USP and really stick to it, you know, and really remind yourself every day, every morning, and say like, okay, what sets me apart? What sets me differently than any other hotels? You know, we're not the most luxurious hotels in terms of, let's say, how most people define luxury as branded goods and I don't know, expensive amenities from imported something, or it has to be Wagyu A5 or whatever, right? So if you try to define your definition of luxury together, that's the same terms as everybody else, then it will be a much harder work, right? So really stick to our USP, and by that we cannot be lazy and just saying like, well, you know, nobody can copy us because, I mean, art, history, and culture, we know that we know a lot more than most people about art, history, and culture, but we're constantly researching, brainstorming about, you know, new cuisines from Papua and new cuisines from Flores and new cuisines from Borneo, and work with our chefs, for example, to really bring this experience in terms of Indonesian cuisine, because when we go abroad and we go to any Indonesian restaurant, you'll always be served with satay and nasi goreng. And I was like, how is this culture of 17,000 plus islands, you know, end up with satay ayam and nasi goreng, and even rendang, we're always fighting with the Malaysians, you know, like it's ours, it's Malaysians. So, you know, we want to also preserve as much as possible the unknown and the forgotten cuisines, because also, even if I ask my own, you know, help staff at home who's from Sumba, Flores, and I was like, what is the food that your grandmother used to make, you know, and she's just like, oh, I don't know, now I just make like stir fries, and you know, so it's important to keep this alive, and still keep alive also the traditional way of cooking it and the traditional way of serving it. So here, even in our cooking class in Warung Tugu, we make everybody grind everything on stone grinders. We pick all the ginger and the lemongrass and the turmeric and everything from our own garden, and they cook it on this terracotta pots, you know, so you can get the smokiness and the burnness, because it's not the same even if you cook rice on a rice cooker. The strategies, you have to just persevere, and that of course you use all the channels available to you. So of course all the social media and the visual communication that you use, you know, making videos, making reels, telling stories through your reels and images, beautiful images, creating cultural events for sure. And that's also becoming difficult because, you know, it's disappearing. So we don't want to just show Balinese touristy dance, because that's not the aim. Like the aim is to preserve the almost forgotten history. And because when I was 5 years old, actually, my father sent me to Bali by myself every year to learn about the disappearing Balinese dances. So, for example, the legong, for example, the most famous one is legong kraton, but there's actually dozens of legong, and a lot of them, a majority of them, are disappearing. You can probably count less than 20 people who can still do it. So, we keep trying to find this and Sanghyang Dadari, like all these old dances from different villages of Bali to make sure that they don't go extinct. And then at the same time, I think, considering Changu is now becoming so global and so young, it's also important to be open-minded, and we still also invite interesting cultural events from other cultures. So the other day we had a ballet, we had an international orchestra. So it's what we don't want is to be another place that just does DJ and sunset and so on and so forth. I mean, we have beautiful sunset from the rooftop, but we try to find real musicians, real exhibition, real artists, and work with them.
How do you motivate and infect your younger generation who's working here? Because I know that some of the staff was working here almost since the beginning, right?
Yeah.
But you have a lot of young people.
Yeah.
How do you make them interested to align with your vision?
They will not want to learn about it if you just tell them like, oh, this is what memorize this and so on and so forth. So number one for us is to create pride inside them, right? That they themselves love it and they themselves are proud of it. So it's a process, right? So not just giving the lesson doesn't work, but they see through some of our even like celebrity clientele, when they come here and they're the one who ask for blessings and they're the one who dress in sarong and they're the one who really want to attend the like traditional cooking classes. Right. And I think for them, they see it through their eyes, through the tears that these guests, when they leave, how happy and how much they admire the Indonesian culture. So it gives them some confidence to say like, wow, actually, so many people from abroad are so respectful of our culture. Like, I want to know more. So that's how it usually starts. So creating pride for sure, and sometimes we make these excursions with them to go to artists. Places, and so instead of just going to staff outing in Waterbomb or something, then we actually go and discover like this very very traditional things that also becoming rare.
The exploration work never stops.
No, but I think that's why we are in the hospitality world, because it keeps changing, and I think hospitality is one of those industries that is really human based, right? And we thrive because we exchange this ideas, this energy with each other, this inspirations with each other, instead of sitting in the office and okay, let me just get my emails done, right?
Right. Talking about people behind the industry, you're having your restaurants and the hotels across Indonesia, from Jakarta to Lombok. What are the differences and specialities to work in different regions through all these diverse culture and languages? What is special and what is different between the regions?
I think that's the part we love the most also. Difference, I mean, I remember when we just started in Lombok in 2008, right? So many people tell us, what, you're building a hotel in Lombok? It's going to be so difficult. It's difficult to work with the Lombok people because they are very hot-blooded and very hard-headed and so on and so forth, right? But of course, most of this just not even their own personal experience, like they hear from someone else. So we did it anyway, and what we discovered was complete opposite. Like it cannot be further from the truth. So and it's true that when you just spend 5 minutes with them, then you're like, oh, they're so like almost like grunting, like, okay, what do you want? This, but very straightforward. But then you spend a little bit more than that, and especially at our Tugu in Lombok, most people probably stay an average of 7 to 14 days, right? They became just such a family. I mean, between the guests and the staff. Honestly, I almost never had to tell them anything. Like, they have this hospitality from the heart that, and I think because they're not trained, sometimes when you train too much to do things a certain way and so on and so forth, you kind of forget to think for yourself. And I think in Lombok, because they're not trained to memorize things and so on and so forth, you know, there's a lot of common sense and there's a lot of initiatives, you know, that they do on their own. You know, for example, the other day, I was hearing from an Indian guest saying, I'm so impressed because every day when I go to the hotel, I have a new leaf written in Indian Sanskrit. And like, you know, and not even like in India, not everybody can read that anymore. And it really like done so perfectly and written like have a lovely breakfast and so on and so forth, but in their language. And I was surprised. I was like, what? Really? And of course, you know, I took credit. But then I went to myself and I mean, I know how to write like Sanskrit and how to write them. And then they showed me a whole book that they researched on their own initiative of they could write in Russian, Vietnamese, in you know, any language, basically in Thai alphabets and any it's really impressive, you know, that you know that nobody told them how to do that. But every time in Tugu, if someone just says, "Oh, you know, my favorite fruit is mango," you know, I see it all the time that the staff the next day bring like, "Oh, I just brought you mango from my own garden," because it was like, you know, harvesting yesterday. So sometimes I think we don't have to teach them to be a certain way, and everybody has to say the French, the names of the wine, the perfect way, and you know, you need to, you know, serve full cutlery to the left and full cutlery to the right, and certain glasses for certain things. Yes, I mean, all of that is interesting, and sometimes we do that. But I think much deeper than that is why we're in hospitality is really to bring out every human and you know, showing the shine that each person and each individual can do. And this is the difference between the culture between Jakarta, Malang, Lombok, Bali. We don't try to make them all the same. This is the Tugu standard. This is what you have to say. But we tell them, you know, be truly Indonesian. Be truly yourself, because as Indonesian, every Indonesian is taught, if you have a guest, you know, at home, since we were kids, what do? You wouldn't be just like, okay, well, I'm just sleeping in my room and entertain yourself. You know, you really go over, you know, above and beyond, basically, to make sure that person has received the most warmest hospitality possible in the most Indonesian way. And so that's all we tell them: be yourself, be Lombok, like in your own Lombok home. Be that, and in your Bali home, be that, and just practice the same in Tugu. So yeah, that's pretty much 80% of what we do. So actually, Tugu adapts to the local cultures instead of the local cultures have to adapt to Tugu.
It's interesting considering the Indonesian history, right? The colonial history of Indonesia. But still, wherever you're going, you feel this hospitality sense. Even the simple houses, you know, the people will always greet you with, you know, warm, you know, very, very open, very warming, and very, like natural.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? So this is always very interesting for me, that even though considering how many struggle it was in the past, considering the people who was coming from abroad, right? And very different experience, of course, but like how much people are still carrying this warm feeling inside of them and are very welcome to the guest.
Yes.
Actually.
But see, I mean, that's the thing. Most people just forget about, I mean, the Balinese and the Indonesians themselves, you know, we forget that we already have it inside us. You know, we don't need to look and copy someone else from,
Right.
Switzerland. Even Switzerland. I mean, remember the first time I went to study there, and like I remember thinking this. I'm like, wait, I'm here. I'm supposed to learn about hospitality. Like these people don't look very happy. You know, it was winter in Switzerland. Everybody was looking gray and miserable, and yeah, it was very. I mean, I learned a lot about efficiency and systematic way and so on and so forth, about communication. But yeah, in terms of like hospitality from the heart, you know, Indonesian up here.
I think in the Western world we can learn a lot about the systematic knowledge of hospitality and how to really bring this up.
Yeah,
But the feeling
yeah,
of this warmth and how it is really to be a guest and how to greet the guest.
yeah,
That's what you're learning definitely in Southeast Asia.
yes,
In all Asia probably.
Yeah.
I mean, if you take Korea, Japan or China,
Right.
where the guest is always welcome with the open arms.
yes,
I think this is where you're learning through the experience exactly what it is
exactly.
to welcome the guest.
Yeah, completely.
You are the managing director.
Right.
You're having venues all across Indonesia, but you're also
Yeah.
mother and the wife.
Well,
How do
yes.
you
I think-
how do you balance it all? There's a lot of
Oh,
on the
yeah.
table.
Yeah, for sure. You know, I did go through the you know, post becoming a post having a baby. What do you call it? Depression. Postpartum.
Depression,
I
yes.
remember the first 2 years. I'm like, oh my god, this is also overwhelming. But then you learn to find a middle ground, right? So yes, to find a middle ground, to find balance is definitely key. I'm very lucky to have a very supportive husband who is flexible. He can work from anywhere, so he's you know, at home at least half of the day and working from home. And we need to be so disciplined in really allocating times, you know, otherwise I'm always like on my phone and say like, oh, I don't have time to listen to your stories, and I'm still dealing with this. So for sure, when I'm in Bali, which is not every week, but when I'm in Bali, I try to have dinner every day, of course, with the family. I'm always there in any, you know, competitions and theater performances, singing competitions, and you know, all the school science fair and so on and so forth. Football matches for my second one. He's really into football. And then also with your husband, you also need to set aside a separate time to, right? So we go on at least one date every 2 weeks, leave the kids at home. And then 1 month a year, we travel to Brazil, and my husband is from Brazil. So we, during that time, I think, even that I'm always working, but it's because of the time difference, I really slow down a lot and spend a lot more time also with the kids. So yeah, I mean, I have to say it's been good, and our kids also kind of adapt to this and you know, became very independent. So yeah, I mean, it seems of course then now I'm working on a project in Jakarta, so I'm spending a lot more time than before in Jakarta. So yeah, sometimes of course they complain and they whine, but at the same time, yeah, we talk every day. You know, we always on video calls. You know, not even if it's a minute or two, and just sharing funny things that I see, or like really good food that I just had in this that I think they would like, and so on and so forth.
Would you like to continue what you're doing and being hospitality?
My kids?
Yes.
Well, I think we give them full freedom to choose, you know, what they like. Having said that, being like Indonesian, because they're Indonesian Brazilian, so at least being half Indonesian, for me it's very important for them to know all the stories of Tugu, why we're doing this, you know, even if their bahasa is not that great, but they know every story of the arts and the antiques and the Mahabharata and why we, the rituals in the Balinese temples, and in Java why we do this ritual at our coffee harvest. In Lombok when we go and do the dance and the Gendang Belek, which is a kind of a warrior dance in Lombok, and I take them to remote places in Indonesia. My husband loves to surf, so he does love going to very remote places in Indonesia. So I think it's in their roots, but how they're going to I guess my hope is for them to continue telling the story of the beauty of Indonesia, but it could be through any channels, and it doesn't have to be their main profession, right? So yeah, right now my second one wants to be a football player, and the first one wants to be Taylor Swift.
Okay.
Yes.
Pretty much common. Is hospitality is a business or the lifestyle for you?
It's definitely a lifestyle. It's so, it's everything that we do and believe and inspire us. But yeah, at the same time, hospitality is, in a way, is the channel of that bigger mission of the Indonesian story, right? The Indonesian history, art, and culture. So yeah, the way of life is that. The storytelling, and the hospitality is one of the most important channels that we use.
For business owners and the new players who are just looking into the Bali and Indonesian market in terms of the hospitality business, what would be your advice for them to how to navigate here, and how they can preserve this unique story of Bali and Indonesia in their business?
Yeah, I think it's a bit the same of what I said before, but how we need to, when you ask me how to inspire our staff, number one is really to spend time to discover what's so special about this place, right? Just go and say like, oh, it's a good place to make money. I hope we don't think that. I think it's really important to give back to the island, to give back to the people who led all of us to stay here, even me, because I'm from Java, and to help them. This is actually, for me, it's really important to help the Balinese also to remember what's so special about this island, what's so special about their culture, to help them build this pride and continue to have that pride by not importing any other cultures and from abroad. This is I'm saying this because I'm Indonesian and I'm experiencing it myself because of our very young history as an independent, educated country. It's sometimes the most important underlying thing to keep this fire inside us and be proud of being Indonesian. And I think there's quite a few international artists who really help in doing this, right? And but there's too few. We really need to work together to make this island a lot more sustainable in terms of culture, in terms of nature, and not blame anybody, but bring this awareness from each of us ourselves.
It's beautiful. Yeah. Thank you so much.
It's such a pleasure. Again,
it was a very beautiful conversation. Thank you for having us here.
Of course.
And I hope many, many years ahead that you will bring this history up and wide, not only to the newcomers, but also to the local community.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for working.